Welcome back to the tip of the week. I hope you all had a great holiday. Today we're going to cover VLOOKUP and HLOOKUP. These are very powerful functions in Excel that search through a column, a row, or a table for a value that you're specifying, and it's going to return you a corresponding value from that table. So before we can use this function, we really have to understand the parts and the syntax of it. So trying to use a function without understanding the syntax is really like driving a car without knowing what a gas tank is. So you can certainly do it, but when the car doesn't go anymore, you're not going to know what to do. So this is going to kind of dive into that and try to shed some light on this function. So here we go, diving right in. So we do equals VLOOKUP, and our little helper formula bar comes on. So it says lookup value. So Excel is asking us, what do we want to look up? We want to look up the ID number of this fictitious group of random people and dates. So we want to look up the ID number. And where do you want Excel to look up the ID number in? That's what the table array is. We want Excel to look up the ID number in this table array. Now, it's very important to note that this first column is what we're looking up. What you're looking up has to be the first column that you select as your table array. The function does not work otherwise. So the first column is column index number 1. The second column is 2, then 3, then 4, and so on. So we want to return, we want to look up this ID number. We want to return the random word that's associated with the ID number. So we want column index number 2. And then the final argument that Excel asks for is true or false. Now, for most applications that you'll be using, it is probably a safe bet that you almost never will use the true argument. So we'll be using false. What false means is that you want to find the exact match. So if I'm looking up an ID number of 1, I only want Excel to return to me the value if it exactly matches 1. True is a little tricky. What true is an approximate match. And it gives you the next largest value that is less than what you're looking up. And your values have to be assorted in ascending order in order for that to work. I'm not going to go into great detail about that because, as I said, it's going to be very rare that you're going to use it. Alright, so when we see, yay, it's correctly looked up our value. Now, when we fill this down, when we use the autofill, we see that that's odd. A lot of these weren't found. So the hashtag n/a says that Excel couldn't find what the value you were looking for. Now, that is because we didn't use the absolute value of what we're looking up. So what you'll notice here is when you look here at the table array, you'll see that Excel is trying to be helpful and it's incrementing each one of these table arrays. So by the time we get down to the bottom, it's looking for this ID number in A16 to C30. If we go back to this list, A16 to C30 is way down here. So that is not what we intended for. So we can solve for that by making sure that we use the dollar signs, which tells Excel I want to use the absolute value. And when we do that correctly, that will always use the same table. Of course, there are other different ways of doing this, but this will always use that table to make sure that we're looking up the same thing. But we look again and we see that, but wait a minute, this 7 here, and I know I have a 7 here, so why is Excel telling me it can't find it? So it's another issue that you could run into. So you see here that this 7 is formatted as general. And when you go into the people list, this 7 is formatted as text. So Excel's right. A 7 text value does not equal a 7 number value, which highlights another important point, that your data has to match type. So if I want Excel to be able to correctly find this, I have to make sure that all of my data is in the correct type. So I could use the handy Excel to convert to number. And as we can see, once it's formatted correctly, then it will look it up as it should have. And we can see that 8 and 12 are just plain not in the list. So they're correctly identified as not being found. Now, one more subtle thing that we'll notice is that Excel is doing something tricky here. So what we see here is that there's actually 2 9 ID numbers in this list. So when we look at 9 here, we see it returns the random word here, which is the first one. And this highlights that VLOOKUP or HLOOKUP returns the first match that it finds. What that means for you is when you use the function, you either have to have no duplicates, or your list or table must be sorted so that the top value is always the one that you wanted. So how could you do that? Well, here we see that these dates are 1010 and 1011. Well, let's say that this was the original word and somebody updated this word later, and we want to have Excel always give us the newest word that has been entered. We would make sure that our stack was sorted from newest to oldest. That way, this word is actually on the top. So when we go back here, we see that now Excel finds this word on the top versus the old word. And that's how we can actually use this function in order to do some really cool stuff. So I hope to see you next time as we go through a couple more things that can help to make your life maybe a little easier. Thanks for watching.